So, good afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I'm going to give the floor over to Nick and let him get us started for introductions. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome, everybody. I'm really proud today. My name is Nick Rusted, and I'm the owner of Core Tactic. We're a management consulting firm, and we help people start businesses. We turn passion into profit. And I have been working with Stephen for quite a while, and he's been an inspiration. He is going to get more into his credentials, but he's highly educated, and also he grew up deaf. And he is really passionate about education and wanting to make sure that our first responders, our children, parents, all have the proper education to support deaf and hard of hearing children and adults as well. So I'm going to turn this over to Stephen, and I wish you all the best in this presentation. Please feel free to ask questions, and I will ask Stephen to pause for questions and then resume when we're ready. So Stephen, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Nick. So, again, thank you for joining us today. We do have Emily here as an interpreter. If you have a question, feel free to type it or raise your hand, and then Emily will interpret your question, or you can type it into the chat, whatever you prefer. So, like Nick mentioned, my name is Stephen Farmer. I am the founder of DeafEd Dynamics. That was incorporated back in May. And I want to give you a little bit of history as to why I decided to set up DeafEd Dynamics. Also, at the end of our presentation too, I would like for everyone to turn their video on so I can see your name and match it with a face. So if you don't mind, if you could also email me too, a description, it's just a brief description about yourself and the types of things that you do related to the work that we're doing and how I might be able to help you. If we could, I'll start our presentation and explain my company and how my company can help you and what benefit we can provide to you. So by the end of this presentation, you will have a basic understanding of who DeafEd Dynamics is and the services that we offer. We do have a lot of different things that we offer, and I will talk about that as we go through the presentation. Here's our agenda for today. So we have 7 things that we will accomplish. Introduction by DeafEd Dynamics, and that's myself as the owner. We will talk about and recap some issues within deaf education, and the information is all data-based. We will also talk about the services that we provide through DeafEd Dynamics. We will also address throughout the presentation some different questions and myths about people who are deaf that I have actually been asked or my children have been asked. And some are pretty comical. And then we will have an opportunity for question and answers a time, and then we will talk about next steps. And then at the end, there will be an opportunity for a drawing. And that will be for a $50 Amazon gift card. So that is the agenda for today that we will be addressing during our time together. So this is a good picture of me here on this first slide. I was born deaf and spent 30 years in deaf education, both in public school settings. I did teach in the classroom with deaf and hard of hearing students for many years, and then worked at a residential program at a school for the deaf in Tennessee. And then I worked as the CEO of a large deaf program in Pennsylvania. So we had 5 sites under that program. It was statewide. And there were two boarding schools associated with that, one in Pittsburgh, one in Scranton. And then they had two preschool programs also, one in Erie and one in Hershey. And then there was an outreach office also in Camp Hill, which is close to Harrisburg. So I developed a lot of relationships there with the donors and those who supported the schools. I spent 7 years as the CEO, a really fantastic time serving there. And then just recently left, moved to Charlotte, and I did that to be close to my grandchildren. I have three wonderful grandchildren, and they are three, all the way down to 7 months. So that is what brought me to North Carolina. Also, I think it's interesting too that my background has brought me to this point. I, started in the residential school for the deaf as a day student and attended a school for the deaf, and then went to a private school. After that was completed, I completed my K through 12 career in a public high school. And then from there, found myself doing the same thing as a provider of services, teaching in the classroom in a public school setting, and then working in a residential school, and then working as the CEO of a private entity in Pennsylvania. So I do have a bachelor's degree in deaf education along with that background, and I have a master's degree in deaf education and supervision, and I have a doctorate degree in educational leadership and policy leadership. That's from the University of Tennessee. Go Big Orange. I think we do play against NC State on September 7th here in Charlotte, and I will be at that game rooting for the University of Tennessee. All right. Well, also, I'm very familiar with interpreting issues. I supervised interpreters in my role at the public school in Tennessee, as well as grew up utilizing interpreting services my entire life. I'm also married to an interpreter. So I'm very familiar with all of the interpreting issues in the educational setting as well as in the community. So I am familiar with that and how it relates to working with deaf and hard of hearing individuals. None of these issues are new to me. One second. So just want to throw out something for you to think about. What would you do if you lost your hearing?
You see, Mary, we're on mute and this camera's off.
If you have your picture on, could you please turn your picture off and mute yourself, please? So that way we can see so everybody can have access to the interpreter. All right. So here's our first question. And this is information from the House Institute. It says 1.1 billion people between ages of 12 and 35 are at risk of losing their hearing due to recreational noise exposure. So just something to think about if you lost your hearing. If we could make sure that you have your volume muted. We're getting some echoes and some background noise. Okay, if you could, mute yourself, that would be appreciated. All right, so let's move on to DeafEd dynamics and who we are. DeafEd Dynamics is a company that's dedicated to deaf education excellence. And whether that's post-secondary, K through 12, if you're working with people who have deafness. And I am very passionate about providing educational support and services to a variety of different facets of the community. And I'm going to talk about that further in just a few moments. So this was birthed out of my passion for the deaf and hard of hearing community, and I wanted to see things happen for deaf people, to see them really thrive in the community. We've seen a lot of deaf children go through, fall through the cracks and fail in many ways. So I'm just really passionate about providing these services. When I went to the residential school for the deaf, my mom had to talk to the teacher about, what to do to improve things and help my reading skills get better or my writing skills improve. And one of the veteran teachers told my mom to stop and just remember that I'm deaf. So basically, they were putting limits on my abilities. And that's when I went to a private school, and my mom got an interpreter for me for 2 years, or my mom interpreted for me for 2 years without any pay in that setting. And so, there's the thing called, parts of speech, nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, all the boring stuff. But when I was there in school, at the private school, my mom told me that I would really make a great teacher of the deaf. And so I remember looking at her and saying, "That you're crazy. I want to be a lawyer. I want to be rich." And long story short, when I went to college, I noticed though that many of the other deaf peers needed help with reading and writing. And I realized the need for more deaf educators for deaf individuals. So I changed my career to deaf education. So when I called my mom and told her that I was changing my major to deaf education, my mom looked at me and said, "What have I been telling you all these years?" And I was like, "I know, but I hate it when you're right." But anyway, so that is what started my journey in deaf education. And like I said, I've been working in that field for many years in the classroom with deaf children in the K through 12 educational setting. But I've also taught on the collegiate level as well in the post-secondary arena. One fact with deaf education for public schools and colleges, well, really any school, is that they teach ASL classes, but it's not just sign language. They incorporate deaf culture, deaf community information, like appropriate expectations for deaf people or working with deaf people, and what they can or can't do. But there's really not much they can't do, much to the surprise of many people. So ASL classes is one of the facets that I, teach. And I would want to teach that out in the community. Also work with employer support. I'm going to talk about that further in just a minute. Public speaking. There are different categories and topics as a public speaker that we can address within my company. I want to talk a little bit about educational statistics. You can see some here. Only 19% of deaf people have bachelor's degrees. That's opposed to the 34% in the hearing community. That is by the National Deaf Center on post-secondary outcomes. Most deaf students, almost 52%, are pursuing an associate's degree. Almost 31% of deaf college students also have learning difficulties. And, this stems from, lower expectations in elementary school or secondary educational settings. And let me go back to the 95% statistic that's there. 75%, some say 75, some say 95, but really it's a pretty large range all within that 75 to 95% of deaf children are born to hearing parents that can't communicate with their family members. Those hearing parents typically don't learn sign language. So when the children arrive at school at age 5 or 6, they don't know sign language when they start school. That causes a lot of language barriers. It causes a lot of learning difficulties. So by the time that they're, 5 or 6 years old, they're really delayed with their language acquisition, and that causes some additional learning disabilities too. Often deaf college students are older than their peers because they start on average at the age of 31 rather than directly after high school. It typically takes students 5 years to start their college track, which is later than hearing students, which only take around 2 years after high school to start their college track. Here's some other statistics that I just wanted to share with you. 466 million people worldwide have hearing loss. 34 million people are individuals are children. So here's just a lot of information and issues related to those statistics. 980 billion is the global cost of unaddressed hearing loss. That's from the House Institute Foundation. That's where I got those statistics from. So changing gears, what can we do and what can I do in the school system, in the programs to help deaf individuals in their educational journey? I offer a variety of different services, as you can see listed here. I do environmental scans of a deaf education program, assess what the issues are, how we can address those issues, how we can fix them. Also do employee opinion surveys, see how the morale is, see what we can do to try to boost morale. We also do strategic initiatives, and that's through partnership with another strategic firm that I partner with often. Also evaluating and supporting teachers of the deaf, assessing and supporting sign language interpreters, providing advice and support for building and central office administrators regarding their deaf education program. Because many times, and I've seen this over and over, and not all schools, but often I do see that the administrators are not very familiar with deaf education and not very involved in that part. And then also professional development for teachers of the deaf and general ed teachers. I mentioned general ed teachers because I have worked in the public school system before, and I have seen, dealing with teachers in a regular classroom with hearing students, when they bring in a deaf student and an interpreter, that general ed teacher doesn't know what to do. And they typically say, I don't have a specialty in deaf ed. So they kick that student out of their classroom. They kick the interpreter out because they don't know what to do. There's a lot of problems within that system. And so I can offer support for the general ed teachers who have a deaf student and an interpreter in their classroom. There's a lot of other things too that I can do, a lot of other services in the public school setting. And that's for all students. So we have Dave Craig's video on. If you could please turn your video off, it will be easier for the interpreter to see me and me to see the interpreter. Thank you so much. Okay, here's another common question that I get, and I'm not joking when I say this. People ask me if I know Braille. And I try to keep a straight face and just say, no, I don't. I am deaf, and Braille is for blind people. But that question comes up, and I've been to a restaurant before, and they gave me a Braille menu. And I told them that, this is not going to do me any good. But I have a lot of stories that I could share related to a, Braille, but it's just another FAQ I wanted to mention. A lot of people say they want to learn sign language. I can do corporate sign language classes and employer support. A lot of times when I go out and visit these places of employment, an employer is often hesitant or scared to hire a deaf employee. They don't know what to do, and I can offer support and, you know, have them be more deaf friendly in the work environment with their employer and employee, and how they can get along with their peers and establish a good working relationship through some basic sign language classes like hello and some other basic vocabulary that we can offer to help everybody feel successful in that environment, not just the deaf individual or not just the employer, but for everyone there at the workplace. And we talk about some potential liability when they have a deaf employee. For example, making sure that they have an appropriate alarm system, like a fire alarm. It needs to have a strobe light attached to it, not just an audio feature, so that employees know to get out of the building. And little things like that can work with employers in those regards. ASL classes, they can be virtually done on Zoom, and then also adult classes. I have my website listed there, deafdynamics.com. We also have classes for homeschool groups or any other type of group. We can tailor these classes to them, and you can ask us for rates. We also have classes for first responders, which is another facet of the community that we like to offer support and resources to, just so that they have more deaf awareness and know some appropriate signs to use when they're working in emergency settings with deaf individuals, like hurt, help, just some basic signs, hospital, things like that, that are helpful to first responders when they encounter deaf individuals. And then we also offer classes in person in the Charlotte area. We do have toddler and parent classes, and you can start at 12 months old learning sign language. I have 4 children myself, and 3 of my children are hearing, and the youngest one is deaf, and he joined us from China. But the older 3 children are biological children that are hearing, and they learned to sign before they could talk. And then my 3 grandchildren, as I mentioned, I have my second grandchild is 17 months old, and they already know over 100 signs as a toddler. My 3-year-old grandson signs very well. And the youngest one, who's 6 months old, is not signing just yet, maybe knows just 1 or 2, and that's okay. It'll come with time. But ages 3 to 5, we have classes tailored for them that are very fun and active classes. And I really enjoy teaching sign language to young children and exploring language. They ask a lot of questions, a lot of why questions, and it's a lot of fun to work with that age group. And then we have adult classes, which really are for 12 and older. Those in person are in Charlotte, but again, we offer virtual classes for adults through Zoom. This is another FAQ, frequently asked question. People ask me and my children, can deaf people drive? And the answer is yes. I actually have a truck here at my home that I drive, and I used to pull a 33-foot camper with no problems. So yes, deaf people can drive. And actually a long time ago, before the days of texting, insurance companies showed that deaf people are better drivers than hearing individuals. I'm not sure if that statistic is still true today with all the texting. However, deaf people can drive. Another frequently asked questions people say, I have had people ask me directly to, in front of my children, can deaf people have kids? And the answer is yes. Another frequently asked question, and it's kind of funny. I ask my kids, is it quiet here in the house with, dad being deaf? And the answer is yes and no. I was actually not really surprised. I don't hear anything, so I don't necessarily know how loud I'm being. For example, about 2 weeks ago, I got up in the middle of the night. It was cold. I went to go get some sweatpants, and I opened the dresser, got the sweatpants out of the drawer, closed the dresser back. My wife, who can hear, woke up in the middle of the night and said, "Steve, you are so loud. You're being so loud." I had no idea how loud I was closing the dresser drawer. So sometimes I don't know how loud I am, like when I'm trying to talk or use my voice. My wife will tell me, "Shh, tone it down a little, tone it down. You're talking too loudly." So it is not quiet in my house, no. Now, if you go to a deaf school and go into the cafeteria during lunchtime, you'll see just how quiet it's not. It's not quiet at all. Okay, another FAQ that I like to share. Do only deaf people have deaf kids? And the answer is no. And previously, 75% of deaf children are born to parents who can hear. So that is a frequently asked question I get, though, so I like to share that information. I already talked about working with supporting educators in the public schools, so I won't go over that again. And then I mentioned the employer support that I can provide when they have a deaf employee. Can I read? I wouldn't be able to go to college if I couldn't read. So yes, I can read. And really, it's like, there are some hearing people who can't read. But related to this FAQ, my great uncle, let's see, 30 or 40 years ago, asked me if I was able to read. And he had a deaf son in West Virginia who never went to school. And he was 16 years old when he died. I never met this family member. He died before I was born. But anyway, so he was shocked when I said, yes, I could read, because his son never learned to read because he never sent him to school. And so, that happens. And a lot of times people think that deaf individuals can't read. And I actually want to go back to the Braille story from before. I have to tell you a little quick story, and I won't take up too much more of your time. But there was one time over the summer that I needed to stay in Chattanooga. That's where I was attending college. And I stayed over the summer to work. The dorms were closed, so I couldn't stay on campus in the dorm. So I had to find a room to rent just for the summertime. So I was looking, in the old classifieds in the newspaper. This was a long time ago, and I found an ad in the classifieds, and it was maybe 2 miles away from where I was attending school. So I reached out to the person in the ad, and I used a relay service. So I would type to the relay service, who would then read out everything that I was typing to the individual on the phone. And then when the individual responded, they would type it back to me. So I was asking about the rates of rent and some additional questions. And I, at the very end of this conversation, I said, "I want to let you know I'm deaf. Do you have a problem with a deaf person living in your house?" And this said, "Oh, no, I've worked with blind children for 25 years, so I know Braille, and we shouldn't have any problems communicating." So she said she'd worked with blind children for 25 years, and I didn't correct her, um, and I actually did not rent from her. But another thing that I wanted to mention here is about educating the public about deafness and DeafEd and what deaf people are able to accomplish. I really enjoy doing public speaking to different groups of people, whether it's related to public school, like during a faculty meeting or during corporate meetings with employers, any type of event I welcome. Please reach out to me if you have any interest in information about public speaking. Also, enjoy motivating people to care about diversity and overcome challenges that they're experiencing to reach their maximum potential. And I can do public speaking at really any type of event, colleges, etc. Another FAQ, people ask me if I can read lips. This is a very common question. Can you read lips? And my answer is no. Even though I can probably read lips a tiny bit, but I just say no in general, because if I say yes, I do a little, then they just assume that a little bit is really a lot. A little bit means everything, and they start talking really quickly and really fast paced. And then some people have facial hair that covers their lips. I can't see their mouth movements very well. Some people don't move their mouth enough. And so I learned over the years that the best answer is really just no. I only can read the lips of people that I know really well. It's better off just to say no to that question. And that question, for me, is only a yes and no. Yes, I can read lips. Maybe up to 20%, maybe up to 40%, I could understand. But it really depends on the individual. It depends on the situation and my familiarity with the situation. And so sometimes I can only read 5%. So it's better off for me to just say no and force them to try to write back and forth with me or get an interpreter. So in summary, my goal is that I'm very, passionate about raising awareness about deafness. So if you are interested in more information, I have contact information here, and I can offer all of the types of support that I had mentioned during my presentation. I have a website here, deafeddynamics.com. As you can see here, you can reach out to me. Text, email, video, phone are all ways that you can contact me for more information. So right now, I'll open it up to any questions. I think I may have seen a couple of things come in the chat, and I can turn it over to Nick.
Yeah, thank you. Great job, Stephen. We got, let's see. Oh, got a question from Cassandra. Just curious, do they have to actually read or talk to read their lips, or just movement of the mouth?
So let me clarify the question. Let me try to see if I can find the chat.
I think the question is, okay.
Okay, hold on one second. I lost you. I lost the camera. I can't see the interpreter. 1 second. Okay, found the interpreter again.
Okay. I think the question is, does a person have to actually produce sound and speak in order for someone to read their lips? Or do they just have to move their mouth?
So this is just for me personally, it's just a mouth movement, but there are some people who are hard of hearing that may rely on the audio voice to also assist in reading lips. So that is a good question, really. But for me, I just rely on the mouth movements. No auditory sound is necessary for me, but there are people who do need that auditory support to be able to read lips. Thank you, Cassandra. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Amazing. Thanks. What
Okay,
other
great.
questions? What other questions do we have? If not, I got a couple.
I think I saw there's, let's see, 15. Let me check something. Okay, I think that was all you, Nick. I
Yeah.
saw some messages, but I think it's just you in the chat.
There was a comment about, if your child should become deaf, or, you discover that you're deaf as an adult, or you become deaf, would you recommend counseling for that person, maybe to deal with some of the psychological effects of losing your hearing?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's interesting because when I was in college, I had a roommate who became deaf at the age of 9
Hmm.
from meningitis.
Okay.
And he still knew how to talk, but really struggled with the trauma of losing his hearing loss at age 9. And so he was going to counseling. He did get a cochlear implant. But the interesting thing is, and again, this was, then later, 25 years later, he got the cochlear implant, but he eventually took it off because he said it was too noisy. He couldn't handle his son talking all the time. It was just too loud.
Mm.
So he stopped using it. But, some people do well with the cochlear implant and some don't. It just depends. But yes, definitely, I think counseling would be essential in those situations. I would recommend that it's a professional who is familiar with working with deaf individuals, not just any counselor, but
Mm.
someone who really works with deaf people and has experience in that arena. You can also, call the residential school for the deaf and ask if they have any recommendations for professionals who work with deaf individuals. They may know a good resource that they can share.
Mm. Yeah. Good, Ann. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Well, I have one, and Stephen knows I always have questions. What is your vision for the future, Stephen? If you could wave a magic wand in terms of fixing or changing the education system in the United States, what would you love to see?
A utopia is what you're describing. Okay. I
Yeah.
would really love to see deaf students be on a level playing field with their hearing peers.
Mhm.
That's what I would really love to see. Deaf people have that potential. And, we can teach anyone, and deaf people can do anything except hear.
Mhm.
So that's a famous quote in the deaf community. Deaf people can do anything except hear. And I also add to that is that they can't join the military yet.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah, so just two things that deaf people can't do. They can't hear and they can't join the military. But, I do envision deaf education and really the community to just live and coexist to be able to communicate well with each other. And there's no reason why deaf people can't accomplish that and be on the same playing field with their hearing peers. I'm seeing that more and more now, but we're not 100% there yet.
Yeah. What's a message that you want everybody to take away from today? If they remember one thing from this presentation, what would be something you really would want for them, to stick in their mind?
From today's presentation, I would like them to remember that I'm here as a resource, that I'm here to help support them.
Mhm.
And my heart breaks every day for deaf and hard of hearing children who are lost in the system. They're left behind.
Mhm.
And I really want to change that. And I want to change the world one deaf child at a time.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
I'll open the floor back up to see if anybody else has any questions. We have a comment here from Cassandra. She says, I think this is really amazing having someone doing this for people with hearing issues. I have a cousin who's deaf from birth, and it was really hard at first, but we later got the hang of it. It was really amazing.
Yep.
Yeah. So it takes some
Yeah, good.
adjustment. Yeah.
Yes, it is a big adjustment for sure. I was the first deaf person that my parents ever met. And they met me as a deaf person at 4 months old. And then at 8 months old, started, signing. I have a long story, but I'll spare you all the details of that story. But I did have language when I was 18 months old, thanks to my parents. So I was very fortunate in those regards. My family signs, we just don't see that often anymore. I have one more thing that I want to share.
Mhm.
1 second. Are you ready, Nick, for the
Yeah, go ahead.
drawing?
Oh, yeah, I'm ready for the drawing, or unless you want to share some more. We have time.
Okay, well, I'll just ask again if there's any more questions. And there's no such thing as a stupid question.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Well, we're going to go ahead and do the drawing. Oh.
Yes, and just before we do that,
Mhm.
we, if anybody has any questions, they can contact me. My contact information is there on the screen. Text, email. You can contact me through my website,
Mhm.
and I would really be happy to work with you all. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you again for your time today. And let's get to the drawing. Nick, do you want to do it or do you want me to do it?
I can take care of it. I do want to add, though, that Stephen has some great pricing. If you do need some support, sign language classes, so check out his website because he does have great introductory pricing. So, okay, I have a list of everybody on my screen. I'm going to move my mouse with my eyes closed and pick a name. Okay, here we go. John Liebert. John Lybert.
Okay, John, are you here with us? Are
Oh,
you
good.
present? Congratulations, John. I will send you the email or the gift card by tomorrow.
Awesome. Stephen, any final words for us today?
Again, I just want to close out by saying thank you for your participation today. Thank you for being here. I'm looking forward to working with you all. Please do feel free to reach out to me, and I'll do everything I can to assist you. And, all deaf children, deaf individuals out in the community deserve it.
Mhm. Yeah, they do.
So thank you again for being here and for all you do and for the kids, for
Mhm.
everyone, really. I appreciate it. I hope everybody has a great afternoon.
Mhm.
And I really, hope to be in touch soon.
Yeah.